Ayin Beis, Volume 1. We're up to Discourse 25. Avram Zaken. Page 183, Kuf Pei Gimel. Which the Frierdiker Rebbe sums up as Sfiris, Megalis, Machshavas, Hanalamas. Okay. The Sfiris reveal hidden thoughts, which of course is expression of the Pardis, Rabbi Shem Tov, which the previous discourse basically began the second interpretation, Pirush Habeis in Sfiris Mispah story. It's a narrative. Briefly, the narrative is the revealing of the energies, that the containers reveal the energies. Matter reveals the story of the divine. In simple English, when we say Hashgacha Pratis, when you look at the world, you could hear your own story, which is, what's in it for me? Or if you read it well, it's the story of God. It's like Hashemayim Mesaprim Kveit Kel. Just like Hashemayim, everything on earth is really telling the God story. Which is meaning it's God's hand at work behind the scenes of everything in life. This is including the creation itself, divine providence. Even though they didn't spell it out quite in that fashion, but if you want to sum it up, that's what it means. The containers tell the story of the energy. However, as we know, we have free will. The containers are also concealers. And in this world, to the point that containers not necessarily telling the story for each of us. It's telling the story, but we don't necessarily hear the story. In Atzilus, however, where the containers are aligned with the energies, the containers are revealing the story of the divine power within existence and within sfiras, within the Chet, Chochma, Bina, so on, Chesed, Gvura. And this he explained in detail about how energies on their own are, by nature, they're more inward and they travel to the source, which means that they are not on their own going to reveal, because their nature is to be connected to its source. It's the containers that compel them, and because the container has a higher root, the energy senses it, and therefore is mashpia. It transmits like a transmitter to a recipient. And this is what it means that the Eibishter wraps himself in a salma, in a garment, in order to radiate. Because the salma, which is the container, is the lavush that is both conceals and reveals, like the words of speech that conceal as they reveal. They reveal by concealing the intensity as it is within the source, or within the thought, but revealing enough that we can receive something from it. In other words, it's not a total concealment. He said, in the root of roots, what's the salma, the garment, is the thought of God, Ano Emlech, God's machshava rather. I want to rule, which is really God's envisioning existence, basically. Through the tzimtzum, that turns into a reshima, which is an impression. That in turn is the keli, or me'ein keli. At that point, it's similar to a garment, which is similar to a container that grounds and draws out the energy of the kav, and through that existence comes into being. And this manifests primarily in the kelim and containers of Atzilus, which tell the story. And he brings the language of the Pardis as well, that the personality is not the container. The container does not define. The container is not the personality of the spirit within. The container expresses it. It's like the words that channel and convey the message. So the container is like a garment, like you have the example of a king who wears a beautiful garment. The entire nation and his ministers see the beauty of the neshama that works through it, of his soul that works through it. That's what the containers do. Okay. And then he says, finally, the end of the Maimer, that how do we compare this now to misper? What about what we spoke about earlier, that sefirot is misper? So the key thing is like this. Number, as we discussed, there are two levels of number. Malchus is the primary place of number because that's where there's the primary containers. So that's where your really number takes on shape and form in the sense of substantial volume. As we said, the lower you go with the containers, that's where there's real quantity. Whereas the numbers higher than Malchus are far more quality related, which means it's a number that's lo yisafir. It's not really tangible number. It's more of it's an energy, is the focus. However, the inyan of story, that is also relevant, also possible in the higher spheres. So the number, the tangible number, in other words, the part of spheres, when you interpret number, you have to say the higher spheres are not exactly the same number below. But the story they tell, from the point of sipur, as we said, is shaykh b'cholos spheres. Because even chachma and bina, which are on their own concealed, relatively speaking, they also tell the story. So even the level of tfunose e misper bina shaykh in sipur shubchinas agili er, and that's Hashemayim Mesaprim, and so then he beautifully explained with that's what Avram did with the Malachim. He was mamshul to them both on their own. They only get zecher avtuvcha, the number that comes through Malchus, the containers. So that but he also gave them the energies. We gave them gave them energy, first of all, from Zohar, in an imminent and internal way. That means that's what he fed them, because achila refers to mazon, which is a sustenance, which is internal.
Zohar is beyond their immediate grasp.
Yeah, they only get the zecher. They only get like the number, the outer number, right? And then he gave them also something. Who emed aleim, he stood above them. He gave them the makifim of chachma bina, which is the status. He gave it to them, but no form of makif. Okay.
Why would he give it to them? Came to visit him?
Well, first of all, when you say Avram was about chesed, chesed is not just he gave gashmis, he also gave ruchnis.
Yes, every person that came to visit, he gave him this level.
Why not? I'm sure that Avram was being mamshich plenty. He's a leader. That's number one. Number two, you can ask a better question. He didn't know they were malachim.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter. But in Ruchnis, that was what was going on. The Torah is telling us what Ruchnis, he was being mamshich into them. Look, from this you could probably build why he was mamshich. It could be very much connected to the shlichus that they had, why they came to him. I mean, I have to look where this is elaborated upon. But remember, the Torah is not just telling us stories, as you said. It's a lesson, so the fact that it says he stood above them and above beneath the tree there's messages in that. It's not just the technicality. But remember, from the point of view, the Torah medaberes b'elyenim, meramezes b'tachtenim, the Torah speaks about things above. So all these things are given. Everything is a ruchnis dikam shach. It's a good question. Remember, he brought the Gemara with Rabbi Gamliel. That's where he started in the Shaila, about that he stood above them, and he said to Rabbi Yeshua, what kind of, so probably you can learn from that to that. I guess on a basic level you can say that when you have an archim, don't just give them gashmis, also give them ruchnis. Don't just give them pnimim, give them makifim. If you really bring it, he doesn't spell that out, but that's what I would say is the obvious thing. That when you have guests, it's more than just, obviously you start with feeding them. Everything starts with gashmis, but ruchnis. And also, to me, it's the classic sign of a real mashpia is that he's constantly caring about his recipients, his students, children, and he's constantly bringing them an important level. These two makif and primim are
bring them to a higher level of consciousness.
For sure, that's a given, exactly. Because remember, the whole Aveda, why do we learn this all together? As I said, it's climbing the ladder. So malachim are on their own in one place. You bring them up to a place where you show them more, the quality of something. This is definitely a process of chinuch.
I think it's done by serving them. Basically, you'd be connecting them to the.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, remember it says when the mother says that when Avram would feed them, then he would tell them to bench. Didn't bench, he says, now pay me, whatever. So in other words, it was all about Vayikra Avram Keil that to reveal godliness. Remember, Avram is Yonei Lahoyet. His job was to radiate, to bring the world to a more refined place. So it definitely fits that Avram was Eis Nahagot. What does it say? Till Avram was, the world was covered and shrouded in darkness. Avram and Yischil Lahoyet. So what means Lahoyet? You could say here, Eres Makifim, Eres Pnimim. I mean, you could build the whole. And Avram is basically the first shliach to what you're supposed to do. This is a lesson of also on shlichus of how you're supposed to impact on people.
But they had an interaction with him. Gufa, that's the.
Yeah.
He lifts them. I mean.
Yeah, I mean, you could build a whole.
When he talks to an Eved, it's even if he tells him anything.
He gives them. He lifts them up, right? I mean, bottom line is, you can learn many lessons. You can build a whole beautiful story from this.
It sounds different.
Primi and Makif.
Why are they malachim? If they're people, it has an impact. It has an ongoing impact. If they're just malachim.
What do you mean just? God created malachim. There's a purpose for them.
Yeah, they have a hecker and macher and elkus. They don't really need. They're not in the world of this. They're in this world. They're not in the world of.
I don't.
They don't. What do they need? An ongoing.
What do you mean? 1 second.
Yeah.
Anyone that recognizes godliness knows there's higher levels of godliness. So on the contrary,
what's it good for them? What difference does it make to creation? What difference does it make so on and so forth? If he didn't know what they were, so good, fine.
Do you know what? Let me ask you a question. What difference does it make? What angels? What difference does the creation make altogether? They're angels. Do you know the answer to that question?
I didn't hear everything you said.
What's the difference that they're angels altogether for a creation?
It must be.
So whatever their reason is, so their elevation affects the world.
In other words, it has to be shluch hashpah that makes a difference. Otherwise.
So whatever, yeah.
Of a higher level in our culture.
So what good does it make to the world?
What good do angels make to the world? Whatever that answer is, that answer is.
The more you draw down God's.
What is the answer?
It's another discussion. It's not for this. Maram talk about it at length. Why do we say every day? Why do we invoke the angels in everyday prayers? Tell me. Why do we need to do that?
Maybe it has an effect on their shlichus to us.
Absolutely, that's exactly the point. Because angels are examples of certain types of avodah, of certain types of worship. The angel's bittul to godliness teaches us things. It helps us. It helps elevate us. It helps teach us about. It's just like why we learn about Eris and Kalim. What do you think angels are? Angels aren't white-winged elves floating around. Angels are divine entities that are part of the picture. You ask me why we need angels? It's not for this Maimarim. There's different Maimarim. But whatever the reason is, their elevations affect us. Then when they say Kaddish, 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 when they srafim emdim amale, when they elevate, we elevate in the process.
But let's say Michal Gabriel, right? It represents Chesed.
Read this Vayelech Ish Beis Levi in Samach Vav, and he talks about the purpose why we learn it, why we daven and mention angels.
Can we explain it this way? One is Gabriel, one is Chesed, one is Gevurah, right?
Yeah.
So when you draw more Elikus in Chesed, you draw more Elikus in.
Basically, Eris and Kalim and Atzilus in Bri, Yitzir and Asir are called Malachim.
Yeah. So
you have Srafim in Bria, you have Chayes HaKadosh in Yitzir, and Efanim in Avsiyah. They're the entities, they're the forces, they're examples.
Right, so you make them more aware of Elikus, so you're drawing down Elikus.
When they elevate, we elevate, yeah. Okay, next mimer. So, that sums up, so this container is telling the story of the energy. They're telling the divine story. So up till now, they do something, so Mispah doesn't have, so the sefirot, all the sefirot tell the story. But now he's going to go and take it to the next level. Avram Zaken Baba Yomim Parshat Chaysar Tofrei Shayin Gimel Vashem Bereches Avram Bakel. Avram aged, he came to his days, and Hashem blessed him with everything. That's a simple touch. What's the redundancy? Once you say Avram aged, what does Baba Yomim come to add? Literally means he came into his days, which really also the same thing, coming of age, basically. Ma'u eid Baba Yomim. What's this addition of he came into his days? Klei Klei Yoka asks, commentary on the Torah, Tahavon Leimer, Yotza min hayomim. What's Ba? It should have said Yotza min hayomim. He's leaving his days. Ba seems like he's arriving. Not arriving, he's exiting. That's a very life-affirming. He's exiting, so it should have said Yotza min hayomim. Ma'u Ba. What's coming? Yeah. Gam tzarich l'havin, Masha Kosev. We also have to understand what it says, Hashem Beirech Avram Bakel. What does it mean that he blessed him with everything? What is the point? And what connection does it have with the words that he just said? Since it's one flowing verse, seems like two separate things. He came of age and God blessed him. The fact that it's coming together is apparent that there's a connection between them. It also appears from this that his coming of age, Baba Yom, coming into his days, comes B'Kayach Atzmei, as if like that's his own effort, his own initiative, self-generated. Then Hashem Beirech, in other words, Avram Zaken Bo, and he did something to come into his days, like something he did, and then comes Hashem Beirech. That's the blessing from above, specifically from above. And the Medrash says, Hashem Beirech. That God blessed him. Bakel, and Rashi brings Bakel was a daughter. But the Medrash says she shlitu b'yetz. He gave him the blessing that he should be able to control, dominate, own his Yetzer Hara.
When you say the most 90-year-olds or 100-year-olds controlling the Yetzer Hara?
First of all, you could say that was with the power of this. I would not say that. I would say Mendel Marozov, every Shabbos when he farbrings, and he's 95 or no more, even more. And the same thing with others came. I've heard they say, "What's Menster? We don't have tivers. We're just like an old dog that doesn't have teeth." So this means me will nicht. That's what they sagt. Me will, wir haben nicht, wir kennen nicht. So Kedem call. That's the difference. Called an alter, you know what it's called. And so that's just because what it says in Chassidus, Ben Meir over a bottle min ha'elam is a madrega. Not every Ben Meir. The Mishnah is talking lemal yusa that Ben Meir is belt is nishtefes makim. It's a bottle. Elam, helam is bottle. But for many, like listen to Rashi, beferish Rashi from Erchen. What skenim amaratzim daitem mitarefus alehem. Skenim tamid chachamim daitem mischazekas alehem. If it's a fool, as he gets older, he becomes more of a fool. Rashi says that when you measure, people are priceless, but if you measure, if you give as the actuaries do, count what's the value of somebody. It's obviously a work. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So it says a man, generally, because he physically can produce more, he's stronger, so of course his value is more financially. On the other hand, as he gets older, he becomes a stumbling block in that home. And a simateva, and a beautiful treasure, is an older woman, because she helps out. You see this every day. Old men correct and scratch and this and that.
They don't go to a higher value than the man. Always the man is a higher value, even though they accelerate relation to the man.
It's another discussion. Depends. We're not talking. Remember, we just learned value. There's Eruv value and there's Kalim value. The value that's talking is Kalim. It physically is quantity, not quality. Quality, a woman generally has more than a man. Yeah. It's when you're starting to measure. Listen, men measure things by size, right? And men measure things by quantity, by money. So in that world, there's value. It's just like when somebody causes damages, you have to value it. Even though, how could you value an eye or a body part? It's priceless. But when you have to value, there is that's clear. It's not like you're saying that's what an eye is worth. You're saying in this world where you measure things and you damage the person, he can't work. You need to have something to quantify it. But you're not stating that life is that price. Because there's an element, remember, when it comes to life, It says clearly amputated. Life doesn't have value. There's no such thing as saying we give one life because that's a less valuable life than another. There's dinim about this. There's laws about it. Talk about values in the workplace is another story. Okay. What is such a great virtue, praise, shvach, quality? Lavram, after he proved himself, he was tested with the 10 tests, and he stood up to them. So now you're saying he came of age and God blessed him that he controls his Yetzirah, and then stood up against the 10 hardest challenges. So what is this like? What kind of shvach is this? It's the other way the question. Forget. It's not even what's the great compliment? Or shvach is more than compliment. Shvach is value, quality, virtue. Well, to understand all this, let's preface what we learned earlier. The Shem Tov, Lashon Sipur V'Agod. That the name Sefirah comes from the word story and narrative. Which means, the containers draw and reveal the energy. So I gave the example, Hashgacha Pratis is a perfect example. You look at the world, you see Kalim. God gives you your kalim. Every one of us has allocated a certain amount of kalim. What do you see? Most people see very little. They see what's in it for me right now. A person who's looking a little deeper says, no, this is a story of my life. This is a story that this is God's choreography. God led me here. Every step, every keli you're given, every opportunity is a divine story. That's in a very basic level what this means. Obviously, he's talking here in Atzilus where it's all aligned. And our avodah is to get to that point.
Sorry, what do you mean by it's all aligned? Just in Atzilus, it's all aligned. What do you mean?
Because here it's not. Here a person can live their lives and completely ignore the story. In Atzilus, Kalim are revealing godliness. In Atzilus, it's the way it's supposed to be. And here it's not. You know anyone that lives their whole life is all about God? Or it's about themselves? In Atzilus, it's all about God. The Kalim recognize the Eir and they reveal the story. If you were able to speak to the Kalim of Atzilus, you would hear God's message. In this world, the Kalim conceal. The Eir is mitzadatzmam harim b'chinas aliyah v'iskalus b'mekedam. Because the energy is on their own, light on its own, is in a state of aliyah. It's always ascending. V'iskalus b'mekedam. And being encompassed in their source. Like it says, God is like a fire that consumes. Like a fire, which is always going upward, as he explained at length. V'gam eine bizgalus. So one thing, it's always on an upward state, it's not coming downward, it's not being grounded. And also it's not revealed, lias eir hameir, to be a radiating, illuminating light. And the kalim on the other hand, the kalim, like the wick, is what holds on and contains and grounds the light, and there they draw down and reveal. So it's two things, hamshacha and gili. First, it should draw down that the oida should be here, and second, that they should be revealed. As we discussed at length, what means reveal, like dibur, like speech reveals that which is concealed. That it should be a radiating light. Where was the expression where he's talking about? Oh, here we are. Okay, good. Omnom. Now he goes on, chapter 95. Omnom. which is like a qualification, Omnam. However, Mashakazav Rabbeinu Shem Tov, where the Rabbeinu Shem Tov writes, is going back to the beginning of the last Maimer, which is chapter 91. Shasfiris Megalis Hamachshavas Hanelamas. That the spheres reveal the hidden thoughts. The intention is not that the containers only reveal the energies, as we've discussed till now. Because the word machshavas nelamis, go back to that language, is clearly indicating something more than just regular eris. Because nelamis it says.
Well, Atzilus is a state of revelation. It's not that it's in the lungs. It's not the kid I bring about. That's what you're saying.
I don't know what you just said. I mean, he's saying that. Listen, he's saying ki'im masha klolos eshes sfiras atzilus b'chinas edu zekel megalas es edus shalamayla min atzilus. Till now, what we learned, you can interpret as being like this. In Atzilus now we have edus, eda chochma, eda bina. But on their own, they're too abstract and too shapeless. And the Kalim reveal what they are. Which means they reveal the Mamalaklam and the inner energy within Chochmah, within Bina. They tell the story. Like he said, like the colors that give it shape and ground the expression. Like Dibur. You have a thought, and then your speech is you're revealing what your thought is. But from the word Machshava Nelames, means concealed thoughts, he's saying that it's not just revealing what's in Atzilus. He's saying the kavanah here, the intention here is rather that all the spheres of Atzilus, both the energies and the containers, as the containers reveal areas, are revealing the divine story that's higher than Atzilus. That's what he's saying. As it's known, because now it's known, that the whole purpose, the general role of Atzilus is in order to bring divine revelation in the worlds. This we learned already earlier a number of times. I mean, all the way back in the beginning, if you remember. I just want to refer to it because it's literally the same idea. It's in Perek 6, Perek Vav. It's actually very, very close to what he discusses here. That Atzilus from a Mutzav in Ensof. I'm reading literally words in page 10. Tachlis HaKavanah B'Savat Atzilus B'Deishi Gili Alakuz Be'elmus. The Lula Atzilus Lo Yodim Klal in Erin Sof Lo Yediv Asagas Alakus. Why am I referring to that? Because I want to just go back to explain why. In other words, Atzilus is the ultimate interface. We're speaking about interfaces all the time, higher ones, lower ones. Atzilus is the ultimate interface because it's the world that is a world, but it's a divine world. Higher than Atzilus, you don't really call a solid structure or a consistent structure. You have Toyu where there's an imbalance. You have 10 energies in one container, so there's no real structure. You have Ak where there's no containers, it's just the vision of the whole existence. Atzilus is where Eres and Kalim. So in other words, if you would say the perfect human being, you say an Neshama of Atzilus, that is not trapped by Bri Yitzir Nasiya, as is down here, is a perfectly aligned human being. When it says God created Adam Achava, the human being in His image, what is that image? That's Atzilus. It's a divine image of the human being. It's an image. It's not as God is beyond image. It's already an image. So you have Chachma and Bina, and you have Chesed and Gvura. You have the whole structure of the 10 spheres, but they're aligned to the source. So what is the purpose of this state of being? It's the same purpose of why we have a tzaddik. To be an example. To be an example. Let me. So what do we have at tzaddik? We have a tzaddik in order to show us as an example. He's like us, flesh and blood. That's why Moshe was a flesh and blood. Mashiach will be a flesh and blood. So he's a human being like us, like Adam Arishan. But he's like the way before Chetei Tzadas, before the sin. So what do we have? We have a human being that's perfectly aligned, but it's a structure. Because if you had an example of something that's beyond structure, you could say, hey, that's not me. It doesn't relate to existence. So Atzilus is existence in its perfect, pristine form. Everything is balanced there. So if you want to know what this world would look like if it was completely aligned to godliness, it's the world of Atzilus.
The Tehu, which is higher, is not balanced.
Well, obviously, I just said that.
Yeah, I guess it's higher.
Everything after the Tzimtzum is not balanced.
Except for Atzilus.
Atzilus is where it gets balanced. So that's why Atzilus, when we say Atzilus is a Gilei Elikus, if you wouldn't have Atzilus, we wouldn't have a model, a archetype, a perfect archetype for our type of existence. So let's say Chesed, love. Talk about models. You look at a model of love and relationships in this world, it's very distorted. You go to Yitzira, it's a little less distorted. Bria less. And Atzilus is a perfect type of love. Chesed is doing what it has to do. Gvura is doing what it has to do. Gvura balances Chesed. It's a perfect type of love. So we see it, if you want to say, we say, Halachta b'drachav, you should go in God's ways. Ma hu chanun afatachan. What's the hu chanun? That's Atzilus. That's Chesed of Atzilus. You want to know what Chesed is like? Look at Avram Avinu. That's why the Sefirah says that. Ask the question. Sefirah says to God, after Avram was created, what do you need me? You have Chesed roaming on earth. That's Avram. Because that's a neshama. So Atzilus is a Gilei Elikus because it's teaching us how to be reveal God in this world. So in a sense, every time we align ourselves to what the Torah says we should do, Yad HaMechalek is that. Why were you given a hand? To give it tzedakah. That's Atzilus. Why were you given Gvura? In order to be able to control yourself, whatever it may be. So Atzilus is essentially, when you say we compare ourselves to the divine midas, that is, the divine structure, how Hashem manifests himself in Atzelem Elokim, in the image, that is Atzilus. So Atzilus is Gilei Elikus be'elamus. Like it says in Zayach Chelik Beis 42b, the Klolos in Sefirah Atzilus will begin Dishtamuden Bey. That the general role, the general idea of the 10 spheres of Atzilus is begin Dishtamuden Bey. In order, begin that we should Shtamuden Bey, that you should be known through them. Which means the spheres reveal us what God's personality is like. God is beyond personality. Say Chakim v'lei b'chachmi yedi. He's wise, but not in not knowable wisdom. But he manifests, like it says in the Medrash, when the Medrash has the names of God. So it says, I'm called by these names according to my actions. In other words, God manifests times at Chesed, love, Gvura, and so on. So Atzilus reveals this to us. Begin Dishtamuden Bey, in order for me to be known through them, to you. So Atzilus is a revealing force that's revealing what is divine is like in structure. From creation itself, we look at existence, the existence coming into being alone, we wouldn't know godliness. What does it mean we wouldn't know godliness? That doesn't mean that God didn't create it, but knowledge, awareness, understanding of it, we wouldn't have. We would just know there's something there, maybe. Like he says, the parenthesis, the bekeich v'yicheles ensev hu sheyiyeh shetiyeh hisavus. Gam shalei adayim tzas Atzilus. It is the power and the ability of Ein Sof to create an existence even without Atzilus, without the intermediary interface of Atzilus. But through that, we would not know God. I've discussed this many, many times and repeated it again and again, this idea. That the whole purpose of the whole structure, whole cosmic order, Lifnei Tzimtzum, Kav, Rishimu, Kav, all the worlds, everything. God doesn't need it to create. Why is it then there? Because for us to be able to appreciate it and understand that on our terms we need to have something to hold on to. Since God wants us to know God, and know God with the logic that He created us with, it requires all these steps. So of course, you don't need it. God could have created a world and give us the power to know godliness. But Atzilus gives us a model. That would be like saying, create a world without tzaddikim, without, God forbid, tzaddikim, without models. But then it would be a miracle. It would require an unnatural type of way. How are we to climb the ladder? How are we to learn? So we're given models, and Atzilus is a part of that process of revealing. So this parenthesis is a very important one. Of course, the power of God is to create without. But from creation alone, in other words, without Atzilus, you won't have the revelatory element of knowing something, awareness of something. Because creation is in a form of concealment and covering of the Creator from the creature. From the creature. Look, we see the fact is, we live in a world and it's very easy to deny the Creator. So creation itself is not enough to reveal. The lulus is yesh, because God did not conceal His presence. There wouldn't have been the creation of this substance, this it that is existence. It's specifically because through the divine concealing Himself. Yeah.
So how do we get it to us? I mean, we speak about Atzilus was created, for the reason that we should have a model how to work here. But how do we get the model? By the time we learn about it a little bit.
Not a little bit. That's why you look to this, and that's why you work on yourself. That's why you daven, and that's why you do mitzvahs. We have the ability.
It's not like
No, there's no magic. No, but you have the capacity. If there was no Atzilus, you wouldn't even have the ability. Atzilus gives us the ability. Without Atzilus, we would be like animals, and we wouldn't be able to grow. You just survive and function. Atzilus gives us the ability. It gives us. It is here. It is present. It's affecting us all the time. Why a person may cry, why a person has yearnings, why music touches us. I'll give you a million examples that we're not just static creatures. We have a soul that's flickering. So there's many signs. We have within us a soul that's alive and restless. We may not understand it. We may not pay attention. It all comes down to paying attention. If you don't pay attention, nothing happens. And if you don't, of course, it's very easy to live life day to day and completely ignore reality.
You don't know who you are. In other words, somebody gets
most people live blind. The Rebbe wrote to Zalman Gadari. He told them that some people sleep at my Fabring with their eyes closed, and most with their eyes open. Most people are asleep. That's the fact. Now, if there was no Atzilus, it would be hopeless. There's no way out. It would be like a locked chamber, like a locked dark hole. But there's a ray of light. Some people need, unfortunately, something traumatic, something to not work for them to wake up. Leonard Cohen says we have cracks in our lives. That lets the light in. So if you don't, many people, that's when they are aware of something. When something doesn't work, when things are working, people are riding high. House is good. Everything is good. I don't need anybody. It's a difficult life. We live in it, but it's not airtight. That's the point. There are openings, and they come different times for different people. And the openings, and that's because there's an Atzilus. An Atzilus is there somewhere. It's like a pilot flame. You don't see it, but it's always burning. There's some opening, and Atzilus is always there waiting, and without it we wouldn't have ability through our efforts to get there. It would have to be a miracle. God can do whatever He wants,
Do you know anybody who announced that they even got to Sefirah one day?
The people who get there don't make announcements. They're not going to find it on COL. When's the last time you saw a headline, this and this Jew reached Sefirah in his Aveda? Because this world values BS. I don't want to say it stronger on the camera. This world values sheker.
Yeah. The person that gets there knows he got there.
It feels different.
Well, that's what he says. I would say that he's probably not thinking about himself much when he gets there. Because it's not about ego. You understand? You're talking on our terms. The more one gets there, the less he's going to It's like the story with Nachum Chernobyl. Who was it? The Baal Shem Tov sent someone. They should learn what means Mekabi Yisurim Ba'ava. That he's Susha. Yeah. That he received. That he what's the word? That he suffers and doesn't. And they asked him. He says, "Why? I understand why you sent you to me." He says, "Why I understand why the Baal Shem Tov sent you to me? I'm not suffering." That's the level. Now, of course, there's yesh mishayev. There's levels. Of course, there's levels of awareness. But generally speaking, people that are going in that direction are bittul is their driving force, not the yeshus. It may not be completely bittul, but generally speaking, they're not into. Like everyone who said, even the scholars, secular scholars will say, who said, I think it was. It wasn't James. It was one of these writers writes that happiness, really happy people are the people who don't pursue happiness. It's 100% correct. Anyone who pursues happiness will never be happy. Because happiness is not you buy it on a shelf. It's when you do the right things, happiness emerges. It's like Kesher Shem Tov. Can you go buy a good name? When you do the right things, automatically you have a good reputation. That's why it's not a Kesher. The Kesher Kohuna, okay, you have to have it by birth, but there's a definition of it. Kesher Malchus, Kesher Teira. That's why it says Shleish Ksayim Hem, and then it says the Kesher of the third of. It doesn't say 4 because that one can only El Al Gabei. There are many things in life like that. The point I'm making here is that's. So yes, are there people like this? Absolutely. A Rebbe is the ultimate example of a neshama of Atzilus on earth. The Alter Rebbe writes in the Likutei Torah that when Moshe spoke to Pari in Mitzrayim, it was a neshama of Atzilus speaking to Ervis Haaretz. That while he was speaking to him, Atzilus was there. That's what he says. Not through any levushim. With Pari knew it or not is another story. But that's. I would also say if a person doesn't know these levels, if you met someone like you probably wouldn't even know, because it's all kamayim aponim laponim. You see what you see. You see what your eyes see. I'm no doubt. I mean, it's the basis of all of this is that there's a reality that we don't see, and if you become more sensitive, you become more aware of it. No question about it. All this is meaningless if you don't accept that. It comes down to what's real in this world. Is it God or what we think it is? Is it us or God? The challenge is, of course, it would be easy to just make that choice. The challenge is, once you know there's a God, also to make it part of our existence. That's where it gets difficult. It's relatively easy just to go to God and annihilate everything in this world. Not that most people would do that. They would annihilate God before themselves. But I'm saying, relatively, it's easy. But the point that God wants, He doesn't want you to annihilate the world. He wants you. So Atzilus is that bridge. That's the interface.
A person does feel different. He says, when a person will know, he's aware that he's already.
I meant aware was more that, was he aware like in the sense where he's like celebrating it or something?
No, he's aware that he
I don't know. Generally speaking, I would not say that. I would say the opposite. I would say the people that reach the highest will be the ones like Rabbi Yechim and Zaki. They come to levels that are not self-consciousness. They have no self involved. So there's more. Not that they have doubt, that they just are not consumed. It's like a layada. It's beyond.
He knew that he was on a higher level than most of the folks.
Okay, that's what you feel. I feel otherwise. I feel that the people come there feel themselves less. And they probably, if you spoke to someone like that, they would not say, "No, I've reached Atzilus." I doubt it.
I was told like Moshe Rabbeinu was a big honor, but he knew how he stood and how high he was, but he realized that anybody else did it, he would have been higher. But he knew where he stood.
What is this semantics? What means he knew?
He knows where he stood in relation to.
No, what it says there is that he was not a shuffle. Means that he was not delusional. He knew that God gave the Torah through him.
Right.
That's a fact. How could someone, unless you're delusional, you think that?
He knew he was a great man. He knew he was great. He knew he was reached.
What does it mean? He knew he was great. Tell me what that means. It means like we know when we're great, like we feel good. Is that what he meant?
But he knew, but he was under.
What do you mean? What mean knew that he was a fool and didn't know? What do you say? What's the other alternative? There is an alternative. When you feel like we feel proud of it. I don't think he felt that way. I don't think if you spoke to him, he'd say, "Yeah, I'm a very big man," but there's someone else that would have been bigger. He wouldn't speak that way. We say that. That's not how Anav speaks. Right. Anyway, Bottom line is Atzilus, therefore, lets us know, as he just said in the parentheses, it could have been otherwise. God could have done it otherwise, but we would then not know godliness if it came from that power. But clearly this parenthesis is making clear, because you could say, one second, God can give us the power to know godliness even without Atzilus. But then it's completely not on our terms. That's the key thing here. Because if you look at the parentheses, it's saying, that there could be creation even without, but through that we wouldn't know godliness. So someone could say, why isn't that the God's power for us to also know godliness? Because then it's God's power and it's not us. So from Isavas alone, he's basically saying we cannot know the divine, because Isavas creation is through the concealment of the divine. He goes even further. That from creation itself you cannot know the divine, because the whole point is that God conceals himself. That's why we can exist as an independent reality. And specifically, if existence happened without Atzilus, then altogether there would have been no manifestation. So it would become even more complicated to know God. In other words, Atzilus has two roles, as we learned earlier also. One is that it plays the role of explaining to us how the divine gets packaged and tailored to shape an existence like ours. Number two, it actually makes us aware of the divine. So he's saying like this: without Atzilus, Savas alone, creation alone, would not is distance. We wouldn't know God from that, because the whole creation comes through God's concealment, and specifically from the first thing. Because Atzilus, then, if there was no Atzilus, it would also not be hislabshus. There'd be no manifestation. It would be like God transmitting, and no way that it's like someone, like a brilliant infinite teacher communicating to an infinitely distant student. And how is it happening? He's not in any way putting it in words. How is he communicating? It would have to be a miracle from our terms. Because when there's energy that manifests the power of the pearl benifel, meaning the power of the creator in the creation, or the power of the emanator in the emanation, the power of the doer in the thing that's being done, there you could say that he's concealed and hidden. In other words, for example, you have a teacher and a student. The teacher is infinitely distant from the student. You could say, okay, the teacher is going to transmit ideas and knowledge, but it's going to be very limited. It's going to be with many examples, many garments, many words to get the student to understand. So there you can say the teacher is revealing a bit, but most of it the teacher is concealed, because there is hislabshus. There's something going on. There's some relationship going on. Except it's a limited one. It's a narrow one. It's a confined one. That's where you can say it. But if the teacher is not even saying anything to the student, you can't say he's concealed. He's altogether not there. So if there was no Atzilus, basically, there was no way that there was a gradations, that the energy is diminishing and reaching the student, which means reaching creation. So the whole thing, but in general, we would have no ability to connect. It would be like a student. I mean, the only ability would be if the teacher creates a miracle and he just plants into you ideas without communicating. So there's no concealment. So basically, saying without Atzilus, there's altogether the whole thing becomes a very distant, impossible, like an impenetrable, not impenetrable, a unbreachable gap. The same is true with the Ayin Eliki. Ayin Eliki means the divine Ayin here means not nothingness, but the divine that's beyond. That's why you call it Ayin, Yeshma Ayin. That's not manifest in any type of an integrated way in the creatures. The way the Ayin Eliki, the divine Let's see, the divine substanceless, divine state that is beyond existence, brings existence into being, brings the creatures into being, is not in the form of hislabshus. There's no, like I said, it's not like a teacher spoon feeding some type of stream of energy. However, to qualify, it says, but it's also not automatic. It's not like it just happens. There has to be some type of application. It has to apply itself. Because it has some type of relationship at the end of the day with the creatures. And this application, that's through the amtsoyes, through the interface, intermediary of Atzilus. As the energy travels and is drawn and transmits from level to level, and all the levels of Atzilus itself, it begins to have a relationship. So let me go back to the teacher to really understand this. If God created existence, let's say, like a creator and a creation without Atzilus, it would be literally like an infinite gap between the two, and there's no connection. But since Hashem said, you know what, I'm going to manifest in a structure called Chachma Bina, Tselem Elikim, and I'm going to create a human being in my that image. So now you have, he's built stepping stones that allow connection. It's like a teacher, not just a creator creating. The creator has now created a relationship that I will extend something of myself that looks like Chachma. This Chachma will evolve and become the Chachma within the human being, within existence. So therefore, Atzilus is essentially a divine manifestation that becomes a way of some type of hislabshus, some type of relationship. It may be a very, as I said, diminished one, but there's a relationship, there's a flow. It's not just two separate entities. It's not just a jump, a quantum leap. There's a relationship. So basically, Hisavus itself, however, creation itself, would not know this without Atzilus. So Atzilus creates that hislabshus. Like it says elsewhere. Okay, I should qualify that. It's a shaykhis, it's a relationship, but not yet in the form of hislabshus. Before he did say what it says, okay, in other words, you have to say there's two stages here, because before he did say, if you remember, he said these words, he says, so there is some hislabshus. Okay. It means the Ayin Eliki still remains apart, but it has some relationship. I have to break it down a little further. Let me read more to be able to explain this. Let's see what he says here. שכל פעולה צורך ליס על ידי הסגלוס הפעל, על ידי בחינת האורס, העין שבו בחינת כיח הפעל בנפול. So it's not in a real manifestation, it's only because every action needs to have some revelation of the one that's causing that action, the pa'il. So therefore, the reflection of the Ayin Eliki, divine Ayin, comes in the form of Kayach HaPoel B'niful, the power of the Poel, the actualizer in the act, essentially. Let me read further, and then I'll explain. And this level is where you can say this concealed and covered. And if the creation came straight from Atzmus and itself without Atzilus, it would not be in any type of hislabshus, in any type of relationship, any type of manifestation, and it would be b'derech meil, it would just be automatic. Creator, there would be no hislabshus means there's some type of application, some type of bringing yourself closer to it. Okay, let me explain what he's saying. I mean, the general gist of it is pretty straightforward. The details are a little more complicated. The general gist of it is like this. Why can't you just say, God is infinitely distant from us and He created existence and that's it? It popped out of nowhere. Just like we talked about the miracle of birth. Go explain the miracle of birth. An egg gets fertilized, starts growing, suddenly you have an adult. Suddenly you have a child, suddenly you have an adult like us that can wreak all kinds of havoc. Right? So why can't you just say existence just came pop, yesh ma'ayin? There's no process. So the truth is, it could have been that way, but then there'd be no relationship. There'd be no relationship.
Most people believe that's what happened.
Huh?
Most people believe that's what happened.
Well, they don't believe that even happened. Yeah, but then there'd be no relationship. There's no relationship. That would be, think of it like this. Everything needs in this world is a process for something to bring something from one place to another. For example, when the Medrash when he asked Rabbi Akiva, why did not God, if He wanted circumcised boys, they should have been born circumcised. So He said, if He wanted bread, He should have given them bread. So it's a shutuf, we're partnership with God. He gave us the resources. We plant seeds of grain. That grain grows. In turn, it's cut, it's threshed, it's crushed, it's turned into flour. Flour has to this, mixed with water, you make bread. It's a process. Of course, the world could exist. There's some pops and then but process creates relationship. I said teacher and student. Teacher and student is a relationship. It could be a distant relationship, but there's a relationship. There's a relationship of revelation and concealment. Take away relationship, then there's no revelation or concealment. Just Atzilus creating a world, you can't even say is concealed. There's nothing there. There's no flow. There's no process. It's like a master and a slave. So Atzilus is that middle space, that middle ground, the middle point where the Atzilus, the divine, created a process. Atzilus is the manifestation of that process, and then ultimately till it's concealed. The truth is the process begins all the way from the Ein Sof and the Tzimtzum and the Kav. It's all a process. It's a flow of a Kav. It's not just God said, Ein Sof, here's the world. What would be, what Eitz Chaim says, what's the Arizal's Chiddush? The Tzimtzum is what? Without the Tzimtzum, we can have no relationship. The divine fills all of existence. How suddenly divine unity, and how are we existing in it? You'd have to say it's completely a miracle. That you and I can sit here and feel that we're an independent entity, and that's true. God wants you to feel that way. At the same time, the divine presence is completely that's impossible to us to relate to. The Tzimtzum is part of the process. God says, no, I will take I will diminish it, I will reveal, I'll conceal it. Then a flow of Kav will come, then it'll be Atzilus. Bottom line is, all of this is to make a relationship. Without that, if there's no need for a relationship, then God can create, and that's it. What? Do we have a relationship, let's say, with ants? We have no relationship. They don't know who we are. We don't know who they are. I mean, yeah, we can see them, but there's no what's the word for pipeline that connects us with them, except the nature that God created, that all creatures feed, give and take to each other. But I'm talking about in any conscious way. A relationship means that there is some type of pipe. There's some type of channel that connects two things. And the channel is Atzilus is the center of that channel. That's what he says here. But to be more specific in the words is like this. So therefore, that means hislabshus. That means that there's some application, because now that we have a channel, there has to be some manifestation, some type of, he's applying himself and he's connected to what he is reaching to. That means koyach hapoel benifel, that the power of the poel, of the creator, of the actualizer, is in the action. Or else you'd say, why is koyach hapoel benifel? There's a nifel, and then the divine put it there. That's it. But to break it down even further, he breaks it into two parts. That's where it's a little more complicated. What does he say? There's the Ayin Eliki, that's the divine force of creation. That divine force of creation could have created without a process, and we would have been here basically on earth with no way back. No, there's no channel. God put us here. Of course He can do that. That Ayin Eliki would not be in any form of hislabshus. What Atzilus does is it gives the Ayin Eliki, that divine power of creation, some type of, think of it of an artist. We talk about artists and a piece of art. Imagine an artist was just able to say, I want art, and art popped out. That would be it. The art and the artist will never be able to really connect with each other. The artist wants art, so he has art. That's his koyach. He has that ability. God has that ability. But no, He created an instrument, and He created paint, and He created a palette, and it's a whole process. And He can teach you how to draw. What's the process? That's Atzilus. Taking the power of creation that's being channeled through a pen, through a brush, through a stroke. So what you have there is the Ayin Eliki is not hislabshus yet, but it has some type of relationship. That's what he says, but it's not yet hislabshus. But since you want to have a relationship between the action and the one who's initiating the action, that's what you have. So therefore you have Horas Ayin that comes in the form of Koyach Hapel Benifel. Now you can say the Koyach Hapel Benifel in the brush, in the art, we can recognize the artist's wisdom, the artist's vision, the artist's feelings. But if the artist could have just created art, there would be no feelings, no vision, no wisdom, and so on. Atzilus is what, so to speak, takes the power of creation and gives it some type of relationship, some type of something to hold on to.
Can I take the other side of the argument?
One second. Let me just finish 1 second here. And this level is what gets concealed, and because now there's something to conceal. There's something manifesting. If there was just from Atzmus without any of this hislabshus, it wouldn't have been with any type of application. There'd be no relationship. It would have been. So if that's the case, from this would not have been any revelation. There's no possible revelation if you create this type of detached state. I mean, you want an example in a personal psychological example? Imagine a person who's on action, a very stubborn person, completely anxious without any seichel. And he decides, this is what I'm going to do, and that's it. And people have a relationship with him usually, speak to him, no one to talk to. Because he just cut himself off. There's no relationship. There's nothing to talk about. If he argues with you and says, you know what, I feel this way strongly, and he hears what you have to say, and goes back and forth, he may not change his mind, but there's something to talk about. I'm just giving you a very negative example. I'm just trying to point out there's things where just a cutoff, and that's it. Yeah, what do you want to say?
I'm just saying the other side of the argument.
What argument? Is there an argument here?
About Atzilus, why Hashem created Atzilus. We could say that Hashem created the ex nihilo, and then the Torah, and then He gave us the Torah, and if we do a mitzvah, so then we're connected to Him. But however, whatever. I mean, why do we need Atzilus? You said that Atzilus was the mamutza, the idea that we trace our.
So first of all, when you just said Torah, why Torah then is Atzilus? You're just giving another name. It says that some places that Torah is Atzilus.
That's what you find.
That's number one. Number two, because let's speak. What does Torah mean? Torah is just asking us to do actions, or Torah also asks us to know God, to love God. That means Mahu Chanan, to be like God. So right there, that's Atzilus. What you just said is Atzilus in different aces. If God did not give us a Torah, He just created like creatures and gave us nothing, then yes, that's possible. But then there'd be no relationship. There'd be nothing to talk about. There's nothing for us to do. We would just walk around the earth and do whatever we do.
But then there would be no reason for the purpose of creation.
That's another story. Why would He do that? I understand, but I'm saying that would be like creating creatures that just are following a path, and there would be that's a question why. But that's what He means here. That's a savas without any without any process.
That's what He did. 5.5 billion people don't know God.
I would say not 7 billion people don't know God, if you want to really be precise. Who knows God? Because we're sitting here, we know God. But what means knowing God? Acting that like you know God, or you say you know God?
Well, we asked the Ayin Beis about. But most of the world.
Anyway, this already you're getting into a whole area. I don't know. You're talking about religious people you think are more aware.
No, this is religious.
So who?
There's a God.
One second. Either everybody's aware.
A tiny minute percentage of people in the world are aware that there's a God.
I disagree with you. Either nobody's aware or everybody's aware. Tell me who exactly is more aware than. Give me an example. Give me names of two people. One's aware, that's not aware. Tell me.
Discussion about it. The billions of Chinese have no awareness that.
Hold on. Right. Wait a second. Let's talk about. Can you give me a name of a person that you know is aware of God, and another person that's not aware?
We're at least aware that God created the world.
What does that mean? You're aware or you believe it? Or you're cultured and brought up and programmed to believe that? Let me ask you. You were brought up and cultured and programmed to believe it. Who says you believe it? You were trained to believe it. You were programmed. And other people are programmed to believe other things. You want to really, you want to know, you're talking about, look, how I see it is 7 billion people have a soul in them. They either are acting on it or they're not acting on it. That's the only way I see it. Some of the cultural programming to me means nothing. If you want to talk really, you want to talk about God, a real awareness of God. So for a person who says, I believe in God creates, but then is cheats and lies and is unethical, another person doesn't even speak about God, but is a very sensitive and kind person, tell me who's more godly. So that's another discussion. I mean, I'm not sure where you're going with this. What are you trying to say? You're trying to say that I don't think there's revelation anywhere by anybody. Revelation are by those that work on it. Revelation is not in Crown Heights and Borough Park just because they say they follow a Torah. Revelation is a process that comes, a person is aware of God and it affects him every second or not. Now I agree, you could say the Chinese, just like the communists in Russia, were not taught that there's a God. But they have a God in their own way. You trust me that you push any person, you'll find godliness in their life.
No, I'm just going back to the discussion about Atzilus. That Atzilus is there so we can retrace our steps.
That's why I know it. That's what I'm saying. And 7 billion people are living after the Tzimtzum Addition affected us all. And if you're going to start telling me that you think some people at Tzimtzum Addition didn't affect, I ask you for their name and their mother's name. I'd love to meet them.
Unless you make an argument even stronger. Okay, you're saying that the whole process...
So I just answered the question. It's always readily available. It's there when we have moments of hope. Look, it comes down to we live in a very dark world. Of course you can make a case that it's very hard to find God, but there's also you can make a case of nobility. There are people who in very difficult situations, massed, informed on others, killed others, their own brothers and sisters to save their own skin. And there are people who died that someone else shouldn't be hurt. There you have. One person acted with a God in his life, the other person acted about that everything is about me. We should never be tested. But you think everybody who says there's a God, put them under those circumstances, then we'll find out who has a real.
So if you know Atzilus, that person who gave up his life to save that
would not be able to. Well, in Mesiras Nefesh, I would say better than that. A person, no, I wouldn't say it in that case.
It doesn't act.
Right, I would say more the ability to talk about God as we are talk about, the ability to read these pages, to write these pages is because of Atzilus. Let's put it this way. God, did He put anywhere in a picture, you said, Torah, Istakal Baraisu Bara Alma. God gave us a picture of Himself in Atzilus. Had He not given us, there would be no way for you to connect to God. You could connect maybe Mesiras Nefesh. That's possible. I'm not going to go there. But not in any, you talk about Yediyah and relationship.
What's the purpose of learning all this and go to shul 3 times a day if we're all the same?
We begin all the same. Of course, the difference is your choice. That's the difference. You can take this and act on it, and it'll be very different. He's talking like everyone is initially. We all start out with the same tools and resources. The question is what you do with them. Of course, there's a major. I didn't say there's no difference. I didn't say to him there aren't. I asked him to name me somebody. Then we'll talk business. Of course, there are people that work on it. Right now, there are people who are godlier than others. I have no doubt about that. Yeah, but I wouldn't put it into the category of 2 billion Chinese or this. I wouldn't at all put it that way.
No, so this basically, you can see in a very manifest way. The whole purpose of creation with that Atzilus, knowing God and all that, is for Amad V'Shaslam called out that for those few that were.
Where did you get this? This is not what he's saying. It's exact opposite. What you're saying is inaccurate.
They could
it's Hepech what you're saying.
Right. But I understand that.
But where are you getting it from? Why would you say that?
They're the only ones who actually.
Are you just playing devil's advocate, or you have a source?
No, I'm playing devil's advocate.
God created 7 billion people in His image. We agree with that? Why would He do that? Everyone's Tzelem Elokim. Chaviv Adam Shenivra B'Tzelem. Why would He do that? Because we have the ability to some way connect. I'm not getting now in levels that there's some people who are higher levels, higher neshamas than others. That's another story. We all have the ability to connect, and we're expected to, and we're accountable. So the yesod of all mitzvahs and Sheva mitzvahs b'nei nayah. There's accountability. God put us here. He hid His presence, but He didn't hide it completely. Atzilus allows us the bridge to get back. The basis of Mashiach. When the Rebbe said that the world is ready, and we have to open our eyes, and we'll do what you can. What the Rebbe, every word he says is holy. People followed the Rebbe's word when it came to life and death. So what's the Rebbe saying? The Rebbe is saying that it's not going to be a miracle. God is not, Mashiach is not, it could be, but right now you all can do something to make everybody more aware in this world. It's very clear. Now, frankly, I don't need amunah to believe the Rebbe is right, but I don't need amunah to understand that. Why not? If you believe in a God, and you believe that God put this world here, and He planned a design in it, and every human being has a soul as well, then it's a matter of the battle that we have to fight. And the Rebbe is saying that today it will be easy to reach people. Now, means it's automatic? No. Also, remember, cumulative years. I think some of the skepticism comes, I'll tell you where the skepticism comes from, because I also have a skeptic in me. It comes from not applying yourself. It's easier to come to the conclusion that there is no God, or that God doesn't work through the world, or why is this world closer to Mashiach than it was 1,000 years ago? But if you think the big picture, that billions of mitzvahs have been done, the world has been refined, that we stand on the shoulders of giants, and that this generation is not just an independent generation out of nowhere, but all that has been done till now, plus the little that we have, there's no clear question it can just be one more thing that tips the scale. But you need to, first of all, believe that, and secondly, you have to, integrate it. Obviously, what I would say is most people live a life. What's a life? Cholach. What's the lashon? Mashalibe chafetz, whatever is the expression, huh? Yeah, b'shiris libe, havle elam. What do most people care about? What do most people will do for money, for a few dollars? We don't live in a world that values the truth nor God. That doesn't mean that it's not possible. Bottom line is that Atzilus gives us the hope. It's there. Now, obviously, the most questions we have are coming because we're not Atzilus oriented. We're Chumris. We live in an Elam Hazah Chumri oriented. So we live the moment here. This is why we're learning this. Let's first, we live in a world of numbers. We're trying to get to live in a world of a story. And then we're going to get to a brighter world. But it's a process. I think the challenges we have is the best sign of what he's discussing here. We have these challenges, but Atzilus is there waiting that there is a pure story. I don't even know how you can live if you don't have such a belief. Then what hope is there? Then like they say, the light at the end of the tunnel is the light of the oncoming train. Right? That's the only hope we have. The light at the end of the tunnel. That to me is the basis of belief in general, Mashiach. Why the Jews were able to have strength to go to the concentration, to go to the gas chambers and say Shema and Kaddish, because they knew that it's not the end of the story. I just met, Darren lost last year, 2 years ago, Darren. Yeah. Right, he lost his young wife or something, or young husband. So she writes in her email, she's someone that went through a tragedy, she writes, in the end, all will be good. If it's not good yet, it means it's not the end. So now it's not just some cliche, it's coming from a person who went through it. We believe there's an end, and if the end is not, the end of the story is not the Holocaust, the end of the story is not death, that the end will be good. Now I agree that's why most people aren't able to relate to the belief in Mashiach, because they live in a world of resignation, and they're blind leading the blind. Most of us live in the here and now. We do not, we believe in an abstract way, but in a day-to-day way that the world is really going to be a better place. I don't think you're going to find very many people that really live their lives like that. You have, but not a lot. Chassidus to me is all about that, teaching us that. When you can embrace that and you live your life that way, to me that enough people do that, you have a Guladik world. It's not even about Mashiach himself, but Pearl coming. That already is the result. It's that type of living Let's say we were all in the war right now, God forbid. Okay, we're all soldiers, and we're fighting 1,000 years, 2,000 years. It's endless. And at some point it says, what's the point? Where are we going? And suddenly your colleagues, the next battle comes, and they say, you know what? You can go fight. I have no time. I'm busy with this. What happens? Ultimately, it's going to have a collective effect on everyone to be very demoralized. But you want to have one commander-in-chief who's going to say, no, we forge ahead. To me, that's a neshama of Atzilus. That's a Rebbe. And doesn't let people. But the natural gravitational pull, especially, it would have been exactly that. Okay, I'm going to survive. I'll try to give my children as much as I could. Let me just make ends meet. By that type of holding you're keeping to your sights. After the Rebbe, I remember crying about this how many times. After 2,000 years, the wilde kinders behalten, you hid yourself from the kids, your children, you still want them to look for you. You remember that sikh, you hear it on tape, the Rebbe says, Zunte gesucht, Monte gesucht. Right? Sunday he looked, searched. Monday he searched, Tuesday he searched, Wednesday he searched, Thursday, Viful Ashir. And there's still people searching. So that's a testimony there's an Atzilus working. But also doesn't mean we're there. Of course, how many people really care about what I just said right now? I'm talking about care as they care about making money today. How many people care? How many would you say? Not many, even, right? You're not getting into the millions. You're getting into the hundreds. So, I think that's what the Rebbe meant, and I have no doubt that's what he meant. And Atzilus means it hovers there. Now you could say, well, if I never see this, and most people are not that way, maybe there's no Atzilus. That's part of that's part of the darkness. That we could say, you know what? Well, the Rebbe Rashab is reminding us 100 years ago, next week, that Atzilus is alive and kicking. The pile of flame is there, and it's up to us to do something about it. That's what I have to say. Is that right? Now, the Rebbe would say in these things, this is what I have to say, and everybody will choose from here on. It's up to everybody what to do. That we can't control. Okay, so this is the whole story here with Gilil. Yeah. Now again, I said what you could say. 1 second, Kol Yochel of God can make Gilil Lakus, but then you're talking again. That's him. That's not us. There's no. Yeah. Vagam. Now comes a question. What time do we have? No, there is no. That's not. I'm just wondering how far. Let's go a little further. Let's see how it goes. If it starts a new thing. Vagam. A question now. He just said that from creation itself we wouldn't know God. Because the creation is in a concealed fashion. Especially if there was no Atzilus. Because then there would no hislabshus, so there'd be no manifestation at all. So with Atzilus, creation also we don't know God. The details. We just know that there is something. Especially if there's without Atzilus. Okay, so Atzilus helps us that there's some relationship and also to know God. So now the question is, V'hagam she'yisavus shemehisavus. Even though from the hisavus muchrach sheyesh mahava. When you look at creation, it's muchrach. It compels us to say there's something that put it here. Because you can't say that a thing created itself, from within itself. Like the expression goes, Ein dover eses atzmi. A thing can't create itself. So let's finish here. And the Shari Kometz you say, Hu Mahar Kova, which is actually a second reason given. Because his whole existence comes from Harkova, from a hybrid. It's a combination of factors. So in other words, if you see, for example, a piece of wood mixed together with a gold strap, like it's an ornament, you know that someone put it there because it's made up of two parts that don't come along together. Since we're made up of parts, We can't say who put these parts together. Harkova, any type of harkova. Elements. Harkova generally means a hybrid. Harkova means what's murkav? Compound, right? A compound of different elements. That's broad ones, but you could say it anything. It would be like anything made up of parts. Like we'd say, can a child be born on its own without? A child is made up of parts, so it had to come from something that made those parts. If you see, for example, a book made up of parts, so someone had to put those parts together. That's really the basic principle. U'kamoy kain, that's one. Mizesh sheyesh behem hefsedus. And from the fact that creatures erode, deteriorate, diminish, age, these are all hefsedus. Harinir shein nivraim. We see that they're creatures, which means that if they have an end, they have a beginning. It means that they're weak. That means that they're not self-perpetuating. And it's also understood that creation has to be b'derech ein arech, has to be from something that's completely, infinitely distant. Because if it's coming from something that's similar to us, then the same question just carries over to that creator. Like they say, like the big atheist intellectuals that ask, if we can't create ourselves and we need God created us, who created God? But that's based on their limited view. They think God is us. You have to say it's a be'ein arech, it's a thing that's completely distant. In other words, to make from ayin to yesh, has to be something that's not ayin and not yesh. That's ein arech, like it says elsewhere. So from this we see that from creation itself, without Atzilus, seemingly, we not only know that there's a God, that there's a creator, we also know how flawed that is, that God is beyond us, the awesomeness, the wonder of the divine light. Okay. So it's a very good question, right? So in other words, he said till now that from Isavas alone you don't know all godliness, and you need Atzilus to know. And I have to again point out, because it's a little confusing when you read it. There's two things Atzilus do. Atzilus is the what's the word I want to use? The channel through which God creates and manifests levels, a process of creation. And Atzilus is the second thing that reveals to us what God is like. It's not the same thing. So both are necessary in what he's saying here. Atzilus as a process helps us understand, helps us have a relationship, and then Atzilus reveals to us what that relationship is like. But now he's asking, but from creation itself we can know it. So even if there was no Atzilus and we're just here on earth, let's for our argument's sake say, like animals, forget about like animals, like whatever, humans, and there's no Atzilus, why can't we just look at our lives and say there must be someone put us here? That's the question on the table now. And here's the answer, the double answer. Hine levad zeis now. In addition to the fact, besides the fact, the chol inyan hasoga zeis v'aydei tzos esesfiris Atzilus. This gufa that we just said, this logic, that nothing that can create itself, that it comes from it's a hybrid, it's a compound, that it's hefsedus, and also the awesome, that gufa, this hasoga, this concept, this idea, that this proof, that itself comes from the interface of the 10 spheres of Atzilus. As far as that's it. So that already is answer one. But in addition to this, he's going to say something else.
We've been asked the question how we hear our question.
Yeah, or maybe we may ask, but we wouldn't. Either the question or definitely the answer for sure not.
Like animals don't ask.
Yeah. In other words, that gufa that he just said, yes, it's true, it's from the Isavas, but the fact that, yes, the curiosity of it, the answer, the understanding, the logic of it, yeah. Because through Atzilus we have now he's saying not only to understand God, the idea of understanding altogether, comprehension, comes from Atzilus. Now comes a parenthesis. How long is this parenthesis? Because there's a big levadzes, I think, here. Not so long? Oh, yeah, chulu, okay. Shahari inyan ha'asoga This is still all in the first explanation. Because the yin of hasaga, of comprehension, loy bekulim b'shava. It's not equal in everybody. Shezeh masik beifin kazeh, v'zeh beifin acher. Because one person understands it one way, and another in a different way. B'loshen Yiddish. Badem leitzach hazeh, badem leitzach beifin acher. That's badem leitzach hazeh, badem leitzach beifin acher. Let's get the suda in the parentheses in Yiddish that you don't know from the Hebrew. It's gishmakit. Badem leitzach hazeh, badem leitzach beifin acher. Yeah. Yeah. This distinction comes because of the difference of their root and their source, the people. And so the same thing, for there to be divine comprehension, is because there's already, in hislabshus, in the order, in the cosmic order, in the process, there's already a sphera called chokhmah, wisdom. So he's breaking it down even further. In other words, the mere fact that we can comprehend, because there's a chokhmah, because chokhmah is no chokhmah of Atzilus, then with no comprehension. But he breaks it further, so it goes even further, because I don't know, chokhmah stima is not mentioned here, so I would not bring that in.
Yeah.
Would it be like the nefesh? And the close the nefesh, you have all the cases and all the chokhmah and everything you draw from there, so the nefesh draws from.
That's with the chokhmah of your nefesh comes from chokhmah of Atzilus. Yeah.
That's what it is.
Yeah. But the parentheses is interesting. What he's adding is that if it's that you see that there's distinctions in comprehension, that means there's something causing those distinctions. If it was just hislabshus, we were created, and you know God, it would be like everybody knows it equally. So just like there's, so he's saying, so there's something that's causing it, and that's why it's also causing distinctions. So there's clearly something that separates the way we understand. It's not just some type of, you see creation, you know there's a God. There's distinctions, there's a... That's what he's adding in the parentheses.
Not because of their seichel, their ability of their grasp.
Right, because it comes from somewhere that defines them.
You can say this guy has a better head, so you understand it better.
The question is, but why does he have a better head? If it's just a so-called equalized creation, we're all like distant from God, so why is there some... Obviously you have to first start with the first thing, that there's chokhmah v'atzilus. Yeah. Now goes the levadzes. That's levadzes. So in addition to the fact that the actual comprehension comes from Atzilus, harigam hayediyah shahayedim isavus. It's an additional thing. That also the knowledge itself that we know from existence that there's a God, hu yediyah klolis. It's only a general knowledge. It doesn't give you details. Sheyesha lekaha beiru mahava. This existence dictates and tells us that there's a God and a creator and he brings everything into being. But from the hislabshus, from the creation, we would have no specific, distinct understanding and knowledge in the way of in the form and shape of this divine energy and life force. It goes back to what he said before. There also would be no energy and life force that manifests. Being the creation is from Atzmus and Sof, from the essence of the divine, without any hislabshus canal. He goes back to that again. In other words, not just there'd be no knowledge, there'd also be no revelation at all. It would be like, a body is here, it's living, and that's it. You wouldn't have any life force that you can speak about. Why is he going back to this? So it's not just the idea; it's also the etzem. See, he's going back to hislabshus and idea. They're both. That's why I keep saying there's two things here. So he keeps talking about two things: the knowing of God and the actual relationship with God. Even if you don't know it, just the mere fact, it would be no revelation. It'd be like an artist that put a piece of painting there. Obviously, it's interconnected, but he keeps going back to that. Because if it came straight from Atzilus, there would not be possible at all any type of life energy force, energy and life force that would be manifest. And the same thing. No, okay. Yeah. So number one is the actual comprehension comes from Atzilus. Number two, from Isavas alone, you don't have any details, and you don't even have any revelation. Then he says, in Kamoikin, even the thing we said before, Yediyas HaFlaw, you could, so to speak, extrapolate that the awesomeness, the wonder of God. That you have to say that the divine source, the creator, is mufla that he's beyond, he's completely removed from the fundamental essence of coarse crassness of the world. The flaw shayib b'chinas eris, u'madregas gevayis. One second. The haflaw shayib b'chinas eris, u'madregas gevayis shayich haflaw shemufla mezav v'lo haflaw me'etzem husa elamas. He's asking and saying something now, that the haflaw that we talked earlier, that you just see from creation, is not real haflaw. That's what he wants to say. The haflaw shayib b'chinas eris, because haflaw, wonder, is already some type of revelation. And in high levels, can you speak? In other words, you can't just speak haflaw when there's no some type of revelation. So in the highest levels, you can say, these things are awesome, they are beyond, they are removed, they are... To say, in other words, when you have levels, you can say these levels, these higher levels are mufla, they're completely apart and removed and higher, superior to lower levels. Meaning that the wonder is not from the actual creation, the actual personality of the worlds. So what he said before, I think what he's trying to say is that the mere fact that we conclude that the world existence, creation existence, means that God is beyond, that's not real haflaw. That's to say that the world, to say that we know there's something beyond us, that does not haflaw. Haflaw means appreciation. When there's levels, you say there's higher levels, lower levels. But if there's no Atzilus, there's no higher, lower levels. That's what he's saying here. I mean, the words are the avaloy haflaw me'etzem. In other words, the haflaw is not from the actual thing, from existence itself, just like me'etzem hus chum niseilam. I think, one second. Did I skip a line? One second, I think I read it wrong. Yeah, I skipped a line. I didn't read it right. Okay, one second. Then he says, yeah, I didn't read it right. The haflaw that we talked before is only saying that God is above the world. So be'emes ein zayin haflaw de'ein sof. Mashamufah me'etzem hu sachum yisaylam. And in truth, that's not really the great quality of ein sof that is beyond completely mufla me'etzem from the crassness of this world. I skipped a line. Because haflaw, real wonder, is only when there's higher levels. I'm sorry. Haflaw shayach b'b'chinas eidus u'madregas gavoyis shayach haflaw. Shemuflam is that it's higher than it. Avaloy haflaw me'etzem husa elamus.
It's even higher than the higher madregas.
Right. So it's not real haflaw to say, for example, an infinite king, to say that he's superior to mortal creatures. Yes, from their perspective, it's something great, but it's not a real appreciation of haflaw. The general knowledge of this that we have from Isavas is only that the Ein is mufla, is wondrous and merumim and above, exalted. But it's not possible to have in this a knowledge and the way he's exalted, like why and what form and the details of it. Because the worlds are completely infinitely distant. Klal. Totally no relationship between them and godliness. And therefore it's not possible that from any detailed creatures you'll have any detailed knowledge in the way God is beyond us. It's all making a case for Atzilus. V'atzmus seid in sof, hariu sosav v'nelam legamri. And if you talk about Atzmus, the essence is completely locked and concealed. Sheina begeder gilui klal, he's totally not in the category of revelation. U'kamaymer, antu ilah, kol ilah, stimid the chol stimid. Like we say, you are higher than all heights, stimid the chol stimid, sealed beyond, of all sealed. Closed and hidden from all closed things. Shesasav v'nelam betzim. It's not just closed and it's a matter of time or a matter of effort that you're going to reveal it. You're fundamentally and essentially, the core level, concealed. And also a reflection of Atzmus the worlds cannot receive. So when we say Hadam in Atzmus, if you remember earlier, he said that you need to have the wick, you need to have the containers to bring it down, because Eid on its own is like its source. It's going to be back into its source. So he's adding now that when we say Hadam in Atzmus here, according to what's discussed here in this Maimer, this discourse, this is the energy that's in an infinite and unlimited state. In other words, in some places, Hadam in Atzmus would mean something that's more defined and more finite. I would also say that this is probably, he's probably quoting here Maimorim from the Rabbi before, and he's qualifying what they say and how we are learning it. No thought can grasp you at all. There's no comprehension in the divine infinite. At the Kaddish, Rishimcha Kaddish. You're holy, and your name is holy. The Gam Chinishmei Kaddish Umuvdal. Kaddish comes from Mudal. Kaddish is Havdalah, separate. Means not only you, but also your reflection. Your Eir is also Muvdal, separate. Like it says, Nizgu Shmei Levade. Your name alone is exalted, is elevated. She'ein arech le'elemis. Im Shmei is Baruch. Because it's infinite, there's no relationship, there's no erech, there's no proportionate connection, relationship between the worlds and God's name. Achu Kodesh Umuvdal Mem, to the point that He's holy and separate from them. Nevertheless, Heidei, His beauty, Viziv and reflection, radiate on the world, on earth and heaven. A reflection from God's name descends and is concealed, comes in a state of descent and concealment in order to be revealed in the worlds. The Shmei Bechlal HaMalchus, in the parentheses he adds now. Shmei Bechlal in general is the level of Malchus. And even though the king is exalted, Amurum Levadi is like separate and alone above. Like it says, Vayam, that's Malchus. Emed Aleim stood above them, because it's like separate, it's above. This is only in a state of Makif. It's like transcendent. Nevertheless, a reflection of this Malchus comes in a state of revelation into the creature. That's what means Dvar Hashem. God speaks, because speech is a transmission that's in a state of closeness. The Bechinas Malchus, Bekiruv the Bechinas Malchus. So Malchus is a state which is, there's two states in Malchus. One is that's above and beyond, like I said, Kodesh Umuvdal, Shmoi, and then there's how it comes down in a revealed state. This is already the revelation of the comprehensions and the pleasure in Gan Eden. And that's because Malchus in general has a relationship with the worlds, because there can be no king without a nation. And even his remus, also his exaltation is relative, that he's exalted and he's above the nation. And that's why reflection from Malchus comes in a state of closeness and revealed closeness. And the way it's Malchus Atzilus compared to the world of Biyah, the same thing as Malchus that's higher than Atzilus compared to Atzilus. Malchus the Ein Sof L'Gaba Klolos Elemis. And the same Malchus Ein Sof Lifnei Tzimtzum compared to the world, that it has, on one hand it's above, but it has some relationship. Look at the end of chapter 1 of Rosh Hamatis. And we already explained earlier that Malchus of Ein Sof is God's Hashara, designating, allocating, and envisioning to radiate in parameters, measure and parameters. What did this parenthesis add? Okay. All this is basically saying is that the worlds on their own cannot appreciate the divine in any detail. Even if they have something, it's very limited. It's not really the way it is. Even the flaw is not on that level. Atzmus on his own is completely concealed. Even the reflection of Atzmus is also concealed. So then where does revelation come? That's where he's making the case for Atzilus. Okay. The answer is Ach Pirushat HaKadosh Ubchinas HaKadosh Baruch Hu B'Kvei Div Atzmei. Now the Pirush, the meaning of At HaKadosh, the Shimcha Kadosh, he just said, right? Right? At HaKadosh is meaning Atzmus is God B'Kvei Div Atzmei. Shalamayla Mebchinas Shmoi. Is God in his essence, his own honor, his essence, that's higher than name. Hainu Shafil B'Chinas Ziv. Zivoi. V'Heidei Lo Yoy Elam Esichem L'Kal B'Menu Klal. No, he's out of the parentheses now.
So even the Ziva Oidei, the elements weren't common.
Even the Ziv and Heide, even his reflection, the worlds are unable to receive it all. I think he wants to say here is, I think maybe there's a word missing. Ach Pirush At HaKadosh Ubchinas HaKadosh Shalamayla B'Chinas Shmei.
At HaKadosh Shimcha Kadosh is Atzmus twice. At Atzmus and then Shimcha the Heide V'Ziva.
No, but he wants to say like a kolshkein. Even Shmei. So I'm sorry. Even from Shmei, even from his reflection, the world's concerned. For sure. And that's why from Atzmus and so for sure there would be no revelation of the worlds. Only way is through creation of a world called Atzilus. Because Atzilus is revealing the concealed. Remember, all this is about telling a story. He was talking about Atzilus, that you have to say that when it says Rav Shem Tov that sefirot reveal a story, it's not just revealing the story of the Eidus of Atzilus, but it's revealing the hidden story that is higher than Atzilus. Okay? That's what he's saying now. So the only way it is through Atzilus. Because Atzilus reveals the concealed. This is now a Gilead. Now we have a revelation. The Yisavish b'chinas hislabshus, Yisavish b'chinas helam. Going back to Yisavish. Because if it wasn't Atzilus, if you look at the world without Atzilus, it's hislabshus. It's not revealing the divine. It's a new entity. God created something. That's not revealing godliness.
And that by its nature is Helam.
And that by is by nature b'chinas helam, like you said before, at length. It's distant. It's helam. It's removed. Aval mashen Yisavish b'chinas gili helam has a gili. But something that comes into being in a form of revealing the concealed, that reveals. It's a revealing force. It would be like, if I went and built a little box right now, the box doesn't reveal me. It's a davar chodesh. Yeah, we say the Maggid was able to see even that, but beyond that. But if I went and spoke, said, I'm going to reveal to you my thoughts, and say something, my ideas, that's a Gilead Helam. I'm revealing what's inside me. And in my words, you'll see what I'm saying. The box may not. The truth is, we learn that the box also has it, because Atzilus helps us. So basically, it would be like God creating a box, but not ever telling you what He thinks, or how He thinks, or what He's like. It is exactly what you. It's like a world without a Torah. Figure it out on your own, so to speak. How far are you going to go? very limited.
It says how you made him sneeze mechatul and
Yeah, no, I'm not saying there isn't anything. First of all, like he said, every hasaga, even that, the fact that you learn something from something. Yeah. Now, we're not getting into animals, because you could argue, the question is, what about animals' comprehension of things, that they survive? Is that also from Atzilus? Or is that part of the chokhmah, the wisdom within the creation itself? You probably could say it's the wisdom within creation, because he's talking about yidiyas alakus, to know the divine. That, by the way, that's a good example what you said. That things you can learn from nature, but that's it. You're not going to go to...
It's only malakalam.
Yeah, or even not even malakalam. That's not even malakalam. Yeah. The savish b'chinas b'chinas b'mashin savish b'chinas gili hel mazig gili. Va'eru be'efin kazesha elam esichim lekabel. And the air, not silis, is in such a way that the world can contain it, can receive it. The cholos al gili hu b'chinas shmei yizbarach, in the parentheses, because the general gili is from shmei yizbarach. We said that's malchus. But be'efin kazesha b'chinas gili legabe elam yichel lekabel. So he's just connecting it to the whole Malchus discussion. Because remember, by saying that Malchus of Ein Sof is Shir Atzmei B'Kayach, that's why Atzilus is a Gilead Helam of it. You understand? So we have it like this. Atzmus Ata Kodesh is removed. Shimcha Kodesh is Ein Sof Lifnei Malchus. Okay?
But here he's saying that you could, it is by Ifim Yikshu. It's like a little contradiction.
Ha'ara Mishmei is Baruch. No, what's a Ha'ara Mishmei is Baruch? Shmei is Baruch is still moved. That's like Eir without Atzilus. But Atzilus, the Klolos, is already Malchus Dein Seif. That's the point. Because it's a Ha'ara of Shmei. He says clear, Ha'ara Mishmei. He says, look, he says, this Gishmal Vashu in Arech Leilmas. Im Shmei Ajashu Kodesh Mudulmam. Makal Mokaim, Heide Viziv Meir Alaretz. The Ha'ara Mishmei is Baruch Zebab B'chin Sirida V'tzimtzum. These beginners, but not Shmei itself. He's not contradicting himself. Shmei b'chlal. Then he says, because Shmei is Malchus. 1 second. Hold on. It's first in a form of Makif. Then there's a form of Dvar. Malchus has two things in it. One is removed, and one is that you can have it manifests. 1 second. Yeah, for sure. That's what he said. And that's from Atzilus to Biyas, like that, from higher than Atzilus into Atzilus, and from Malchus Ein Sof into the worlds. So not Atzilus to Gabi, yeah. So closer, because closer, it comes from Shmei. Look, there is, at the end of the day, Hu, Ata, and Shmei are not the same. Shmei is Ein Sof. The question is, if you only stop there, you wouldn't have any gili that's relative to the world. You'd have Ein Sof Abligvul, basically. In other words, it's all levels.
That's Atzilus. I think.
Yeah. Well, the fisha gili b'chinas midas pratis b'chinas chachma binu chesed gvura, and because the gili in Atzilus is in detailed emotions, b'chinas chachma bina. Or midas. It doesn't just mean motions. He means midas means measurements even. Because chachma bina is not midas. Chachma bina v'chesed gvura. Ayadezeh nimtza soga lakiz v'argoshes alakuz be'elam. V'argishus alakuz be'elam. Through this comes comprehension of the divine and the feelings and a sensation of the divine in this world. He said this language once, said it earlier. Yeah, but regesh, feelings. And through this we also know the way this revelation, this energy and revelation takes place, the eifin of it, the way it manifests. Because since they are distinct faculties and feelings, faculties. They can have, because now we're dealing with specific tools. We have words. We have specific instruments. So through them can be a comprehension. In what way, and how, and ma, and what. In what method, how, and ma, and what. The how, what, and where, so to speak. Which means that we comprehend the divine light, energy. This is what it says in Zohar that we learned in the beginning of the chapter. That he created the 10 spheres of the Atzilus begin in order to Yishtamudin Lei. They would say Yishtamudin Bei, by the way. Interesting, Bei and Lei. Yishtamudin Bei means that through them you should be known. Yishtamudin Lei means Yishtamudin Lei that it's be known to us, Lei to them. Is the Bei going on through them, Bei through them, or Lei to them? See the difference?
What does it say?
I think it says Bei. But it's interesting, he says Lei and Lei. The truth is the Havana is in both. It's through them and to them. Yishtamudin Lei b'midas delay.
Should know him.
Yishtamudin Lei. Begin Yishtamudin Bei. Bei means through them. They should know them. Yishtamudin Lei b'midas delay. Of his Yishtamudin Lei, they should be known b'midas delay.
Through his midas.
Midas delay means through his midas?
Yeah.
Midas delay. Yishtamudin Lei. So Lei means through also, like Bei?
To know him how? The midas delay, through his midas.
So Yishtamudin Lei, to know him.
Yeah.
It's not Bei, Yishtamudin Bei.
It says right here, it says right there, Shem Tov.
It is delay through his midas delay in his midas. As he's concealed, as he's confined. The specific midas and specific faculties, midas, emotions, through this yedim akirim elikus, we know and we recognize the godliness.
When he's mitzamtzim, it's not in the midas.
Yeah, in other words, b'midas delay, the midas of God. Look what it says in Pardes Shadal Perikhes, 4th gate, chapter 8. Al Maimer Zeh, begin the Shtamudin Lei, obey Shezeu Gamkin Al Yedei HaKelim She'esim Tzir V'Tmuna Ba'er. That this knowledge is also through the containers that make a shape and an image, picture, in the energy, in the light. So in other words, it's the Eris and the Kelim. Ach Ayedei Zeh Yedim Elikus. They're making it, but through this we know godliness. V'zel kol Atzilus Nisava b'Bchinas Gilei Helam Dafka, and this is the general idea of Atzilus that came into being in a revealing the concealed specifically. B'Chdei Sheyeh Gilei Lekus be'Elamis. You know, there should be the divine revelation in the worlds. But you'll see from the next chapter, this is still not Ein Sof L'Mayla Atzilus.
We're still in the second story, right? We're still in the second midas.
Yeah. It's all story, but interesting. Then he says, okay, we'll have to read the next one to see that. So really what he explained here, and just briefly in this chapter, that the story of Atzilus, I'm going to read it. The story of Atzilus is the story of revelation of the divine, and that gives us the ability to know. We would not know divine, and especially not the details and all comprehension without Atzilus. Atzilus is the ultimate interface. And it's conscious knowledge. Why he's not mentioning Moichus Timah is very simple now, because Moichus Timah is, once you know this, the question then is what connects Atzilus to that which is above Atzilus. So you need interface in the unconscious.
That's probably true on every level, though.
Yeah, absolutely. But we're spelling with him out. And he's giving us the stepping stones that we can actually reside there for a little while.
It should have been almost the preface of the whole
As I told you, page Ayin Beis, he said it already. It's just that's now being spelled out. It's almost, if you go there, it's almost word for word. No, what did I say? What page was it? Yud. It was page, right here, chapter Vav, rather. I told you, this the Maimorim here are very much a flow from there, but they're fully much more appreciated now because he made the case that Atzilus is rooted in the 10 hidden spheres. That's a critical stepping stone. Because without that, it's not Gilei Helam. Because if Atzilus is also creation, then it's not a proper interface.
And it's also like the first pages of the whole Ayin Beis. It's like Bereshit Bora Elohim.
Let's do the Kitzur.
It's like the way that
Kitzur. The summary, Kitzur v'hinei machshavas hanalamis, which is the language of Rabbeinu Shem Tov that the Pardes cites. These hidden thoughts, which is what are revealed through the story of Atzilus, through the Sefirah, Melashon Sipur story, HaKavana Le'ein Sof Shel L'mayla Atzilus. The intention of that is the Ein Sof that's higher than Atzilus. The Hinei Hisavas Atzilus will begin Dishtamudin Bei. back to Bay. Because Shabbos Atzilus, the bringing into existence of Atzilus, is in order to begin that it should be the Ishtamudin, in order the Ishtamudin that you should be known through it. So I guess the Diak Lay is very big. He wants to say you should be known through it, but with Gelay, through your midas. Yeah. The Meisavas Levad lo hayinu diedim elikus, not hayinu. From Meisavas alone, from creation itself, meaning without Atzilus, look at our existence, we wouldn't really know God. Because He's in a state of concealment. Yeah, if you took away Atzilus, we would have an airtight, locked reality, and we would never know each other. That would be very sad. Because why would we be sitting and learning, you and I? Especially if the Savas was also Matzmas in Sof. Without Atzilus, from Matzmas there's no relationship and there's no manifestation, no process. However, by contrast, the Ayin Aliki is already a reflection of there's already some relationship. And a reflection of that Ayin, that's what I said, the Ayin is like Ein Sof. A reflection of it is Atzilus. That's already in the form of hislabshus. He manifests.
Real structure, and Atzilus has no structure. So how do we relate the two together?
That's why there's Oyer. That's why there's Oyer. The summary is a very sharp summary. It gives you the good picture. And even though from Hisavis you do know there's a Mahava, there's a creator. From creation you know there's a creator. And that He's infinitely distant, meaning that He's awesome, He's beyond, He's wondrous. But this knowledge comes from Chacham and Bina Datzilus. This itself comes. And the second thing is that this only gives you a general awareness that there's a God. And also this is not real hafla. To say that something is beyond the yesh is not real awesomeness. To say something is greater than an ant is not a great compliment. Someone says, you're great. You're greater than the ants in the street. And also, and through this, meaning if it came straight from Atzmus, there would not be. He said it before as well. Now he's going back that there would be no Gili Ve'er V'chayz Be'elmus. In other words, there's three things. There's really two things here going on. One is the creation is in a way that there's the Koyach HaPel, the Koyach, that there's God, it's closer to creation, the Pel. That's what he's saying here. And then there's the awareness of it.
First he's talking about the awareness.
First he started the awareness, and then in that he brought also Savas. If Savas came from Atzmus, then it would be even more distant. So this gives us awareness, and then it also gives us idea. There's a Ervachayis Be'elmas. There's a Gili. I don't think it's a third thing. I think it's going back to the. I told you there's two things that Atzilus does. It reveals God. It creates a relationship with God because God has a so-called. It's basically creation is done through it, and awareness is the second thing.
What's the relationship? Is it?
Relationship means that there's a closeness. It's connected. It's haba hatalia, but it's two different aspects of it.
Which one is the soul?
Awareness. There's awareness because He creates it through it. In other words, He gives us stepping stone. God uses asada maimoris. He uses instruments, so we can use the instruments to go backwards. He uses asada maimoris nivreelim, right? He uses chachma bina chesed gvura to create. So we can, and we are in the image of God. So we use our chachma bina to connect.
I just want to understand.
It's like a stakel baraisa bara alma, kach bar nash, osik baraisa v'kayim alma. Okay. Avram, if you look in the Pnim, he's not saying anything new. He said it inside. I'll show it to you inside. After he finished with that understanding, he's speaking about Ayin, the Ayin, is Atzmus alone would not be a chayes mislabish. There'd be no gili chayes in this world. There'd be no gili chayes. So there's two things. One is that we have a soul that's revealed in us and gives us life. Another is that we're aware of the soul and we can understand it. The second one is that there is a soul and a life force in there.
Because we wouldn't feel our souls. We wouldn't feel.
It would be like it would be like a stone, yeah.
Like a machine,
and it would be like a miracle. It would be like we wouldn't understand what's going on. We may.
You feel from the level, from the highest.
Yeah. Kei chapel benifel.
Okay. Atzilus sosum.
Bizambi.
Atzilus sosum.
One second. Shari Atzmus Sosum is because Atzmus is like a closed box. Sosum is closed, concealed, completely concealed, but fundamentally. V'gam Gili Atzmus less machshavet v'isabei, and also Gili Atzmus, no thought can grasp it. At the Kodesh v'Shimcha Kodesh, he and fear of his reflection is also removed. Ha'orim mishmei b'chinas Gili adei tzimtzum, and a reflection from the name, that is a state of Gili that through the tzimtzum becomes revealed. That's Malchus of Ein Sof that becomes revealed to Hashara. At the Kodesh removed l'gamri, but at the Kodesh is completely removed. Like the Atzilus shu Gili Ahelam, only through Atzilus which reveals the concealed. The Hainu adei tzimtzum, but they come through concealments. Or Bob Madreges Protis and comes into specific levels. Aidezehu Gili Eru Chayis. Through this is the revelation of the energy and the life force. V'hasogis v'hagigishus alikis. Both things again, the comprehensions and the sensation, the feelings.
At the Kaddish removed the gamma is like if the Shmaiz is moved is by the Gewiss at the Kaddish.
He said that. That's what. It goes back and forth. And at is for sure. 1 second. Let me just. So we just did the beginning of Discourse 25, Avram Zaken, chapter 95, 183 through 185.